Hey everybody, Corey here coming at you with another knife review. Today we are taking a look at the Anton van der Westhuizen Angel's Finger. Forgive me, I'm not South African. I'm assuming that's the best way to pronounce his name. But if you're new around here, consider subscribing. I'm leaning a little bit more towards the higher end of things these days, which I know might not be for everybody. But I do feel like it's more important than ever for me to get these videos out because these are the kinds of knives where there's not enough information and I think there needs to be more. Now, unfortunately, this one is coming and going relatively quickly. And so I wanted to put out a video about what you're getting in a custom knife, you know, how they differ from production knives, because that's a conversation on its own. But we'll save that for another day. Just understand that paying this much for a knife, which this one was $1,400, doesn't necessarily mean you're getting a better knife. I'm not saying that's the case with this one. I'm just saying that's not how customs work. You're not, if you pay 3 times the price of a $500 knife, you're not getting 3 times the knife. That's just not how it works, okay? But without further ado, let's continue. So let's just open this up. We're going to do some size comparisons, and I struggle with the size comparisons on the customs because I don't know, the kind of people who are throwing 1,500 around for a knife, I don't know what they want to see as a size comparison, but I'll show you the knives that everybody generally knows. Here it is next to the Ontario knives. We're at number 2. You can see we've got about, half an inch, 3/4 of an inch longer in overall length than the Ontario knives. Are at number 2. Here it is next to the Spyderco PM2, and I'm showing these because these are knives that I think just everybody knows. You can see this is just about the reverse. Here, let me flip it over so you can actually kind of see them right next to each other. Coming in about half an inch shorter in overall length than the Spyderco PM2. And then I figured, here's a South African, another South African that everyone pretty much knows. Here it is next to the Arno Bernard Imamba. Again, we'll flip it so we can get them nice and close to each other. Probably, obviously, about 1/4 of an inch shorter than the Imamba, but for all intents and purposes, kind of the same as the Imamba. So let's start talking about the knife. So obviously, it's a custom. And so your configuration might not be the same as my configuration. It depends on what you want. But for this one right here, if you wanted to chase this, we have Damascus inlays and pivot collars. There it is on the pivot collar. Excuse me. We have black Damascus on the pocket clip, which is why you can see that white in there, the white and the black. That is the zirconium. That is the black in black Damascus. And technically, this is a black Damascus backspacer. You can kind of see the gray streaks in the middle. But, for all intents and purposes, you probably couldn't tell if it was black or regular Damascus. Then last but not least, we have a Thor Damasteel blade. They do not all come with a mirror finished edge. That is, that's what I do to my knives. He puts this jimping on his flipper tabs. Dare I call it jimping? You can see it's almost like an earthy texture. I don't know if he Dremels it or how he does it, but it's not just those straight lines that you do with like a diamond file. It's textured, and it's actually really nice. But we'll get into that as we move through this review. This won't be particularly long. I find that with customs, there's a lot of subjectivity, right? And right out the gate, again, might not be on yours because it depends on what blade you choose. I chose the blade with the 1, 2, 3 way deployment. So you've got your regular flipper tab, you've got your front flipper, and you've got your thumb hole, which can actually be used to kind of reverse flick it like with a Spyderco. I did that on purpose. I figured, why not? I like the way it looks, and I like fidgeting with my knives, so why not have a custom where I can do all of that? This is also a black Cerakote finish, by the way. I didn't say that, but again, it all depends. Yours might not be. So let's talk about the things that the knife does well. Well, like with all customs, you're going to get what you want, right? Because you get to choose what you want. And there's a little asterisk there for this one, and we'll talk about that. in a second. But, I wanted all of these things, and so I got them, and so that's really nice. But let's talk about those things. Let's talk about how well done they are. This handle is contoured. It's not just a flat scale, it's actually contoured. He's rounded the edges a bit, and he's rounded the top a bit. And if you're familiar with machining and manufacturing, doing something like an inlay, or even keeping a consistent milling pattern on a contoured rounded edge is infinitely more complicated than it is to do it on just like a flat slab, right? Like this is some custom work I had done on my imamba, right? But when the imamba has no contour, right? It's flat scales, they've got chamfers on the edge. But when you do this kind of work, this isn't milling, this is laser, but if you were to do this milling on a flat kind of surface, it's much easier to achieve than it is on a round surface like this. And the reason I'm bringing that up is because these inlays effectively couldn't be any better. I mean, I can technically, literally technically feel the transition between the Timascus and the Cerakote, but it's as good as I could physically ask for it to be, I guess. I mean, if it maybe perfect is as good as I could literally ask for it to be. But the pivot collars, the inlays, those inlays are just, they're as good as I could ask for them to be. And so in that regard, I would say, yeah, I mean, you're not getting any kind of shoddy work when it comes to the inlays themselves. So that's nice, because that's kind of one of the screaming design pieces of this particular knife. The angel's finger always has this inlay design going on with it. That's part of what you're getting. The other thing is the action, and this is going to be kind of in both the good and the bad for me. It's, my God, it's so smooth, and it's almost always gravity shut. It kind of depends on how you do it, but if you just kind of, yeah. It's a little inconsistent, only because it runs on IKBS bearings, which means they are free floating bearings. They are not in a cage. And in my experience, those tend to have inherently just some inconsistency with the position of those bearings and how they decide to roll and whether or not they're rolling up against each other in a certain way. The knife even makes a kind of creak. Let me see if I can get it. I'm not sure if you can hear that on the camera, but it makes a sort of creaking noise as it closes, because those are the free bearings, the freestanding bearings, kind of rolling against each other. It's a very unique kind of tactile sound. But the action is crazy smooth. But also, for it to be this smooth, the pivot has to be backed out a little bit, and it introduces some blade play, and I'll talk about that later on in the section. But if you're the kind of person who's an action junkie, and if you're not a perfectionist like me and you're not going to go crazy on, oh my God, the blade play is going to drive me insane, oh my God, this is great for you. I haven't seen another custom with this many deployment options. I mean, this is fantastic. And the action looks worse here because under a camera it's much harder, but I can promise you when it's straight up and down, it just wants to fall shut, right? So, other than that, like where the backspacer meets the scales, this is wonderful. It's just the perfect size. Pocket clip, pocket tension, or spring tension, there's no issues there. Lockup, no issues there. Centering, no issues there. I mean, aside from, there's going to be two things that I talk about. Let's move into the how do I feel about this knife overall? I am weird. I am a perfectionist. You might not be. I couldn't get away from the fact that I couldn't get a gravity shut action without also loosening the pivot and introducing blade play. That's a me thing. You might say, hey, whatever, as long as I can, do X, Y, and Z, I don't care. For me, I'm still early in my customs collecting career, and somewhere in my brain, I'm thinking, if I have a production that's $400 where I can get a gravity shut with no blade play, my custom should be able to gravity shut with no blade play. That's not necessarily the case. And again, that's going to be a separate video. But you have to remember, when you start getting into handmade customs, a human is doing this. A human is finishing this. A human is machining these parts. A human is hand fitting these parts. There is going to be in the custom world a certain level of human intervention that leads to human variability. Now, could he have spent a decade making sure that this knife was absolutely perfect? I'm exaggerating there, but you get the point. A lot of time? Yes, he could have. Is that the case for this one? Well, it depends on what your idea of perfect is. You could tighten the pivot and make the action a lot tighter, and now it's not going to drop shut. It's got a really tight action, but it has no blade play. I just don't like thinking about that choice when I'm looking at my knives. I want them to just have everything. And yes, that means for me personally, I go through quite a few knives because for them to stay in my collection, they basically need to be perfect, and basically nothing in this world is perfect. So that's how we got here. So I will say that about the action. It's a little bit difficult to tune, and that was just like a fly buzzing around my head and flying in my ear every now and then. It's just I couldn't touch the knife without thinking about it, and so that's where I got with it. The only other thing I'll say, you have to think about these things in terms of what are you buying here? And I think it's pretty obvious with a knife like this. You're buying art, okay? You think you're buying a knife. If you don't think about it enough, you think you're buying a knife. And if you're the kind of person who doesn't pay for knives in this price range, what you see in front of you is a knife. But what this actually is art, right? Put this here. That's a knife, okay? The Rat 2 is a knife. But in a world of, say, paintings, right? This is what's up at your local coffee shop. It is a painting. It's something. It's something that someone made, but it's a painting. This is the Mona Lisa, right? And you don't look at the Mona Lisa and go, oh, there's a little imperfection in the corner. I don't like the Mona Lisa anymore. It's not a good painting, right? That's kind of the best comparison I'll make right now. And maybe people do still look at the Mona Lisa and say, no, that's just art, just like anything else. But that's where I'm at with something like this. And so, why that's a really long way to go into my final complaint with this knife. This handle, look at the edges on this handle. Technically, he might have hit those with some sandpaper at some point just to get them down so they're not literally 90-degree angles. The knife is, quite frankly, uncomfortable to hold. There are abrupt edges absolutely everywhere on the knife, and I tried for a really long time. I cannot grab this thing in any way that is just straight up comfortable. I can't even choke up here because you can see the flipper tab protrudes above the scale, so that kind of digs into your hand when you dig up there. Your fingers have to fit perfectly in here, and if they don't, they hit this edge here, and then they have to fit perfectly here, and if they don't, they hit this edge here, and they have to wrap around here, but as they're wrapping around, they've got this edge, and this edge, and this edge, and this edge, and look, okay, I get it. This probably isn't the knife that you're gonna go beat up and use for 8 hours on the job site, but I do feel obligated to put that out there. This is a gorgeous piece. It's the most gorgeous knife that I've ever handled, to be quite honest. I'm gonna put that out there. This is the most beautiful knife I've ever personally handled, in my opinion. But it is closer, in my opinion, to art than to a strong tool. A tool that I would want to use and have in my hand every single day. So I want to say that if you're the kind of person who might be wild enough to throw $1,400 at a knife like this, and you intend to actually beat it up and use it, and you want it to feel good, it's really hard. It's not that this knife couldn't feel good for anybody in the world, but because of how the geometry of the handle works, right? Little edge, steep, little edge here, a steep drop, another edge, a steep drop. Someone out there has the perfect hand to grab this knife and go, oh my God, it fits my hand perfectly. But I'm thinking that's like a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of the population, right? This handle is so specifically designed that for it to be super comfortable in your hand, what are the odds? So the last thing I'll say and this is in the custom, this is very unique to the custom maker space. Anton was extremely hard to get a hold of. I tried to get a hold of Anton for about 3 months. I sent him separate DMs because that's how these people sell these knives. A lot of these custom makers, they sell them on like Instagram, right? I sent him like 3 separate DMs. I couldn't get him to respond to any of my DMs. I left comments on his pictures where I would say, wow, this looks beautiful, just to see if he would respond. And the weird thing was, he would respond to my comments on the pictures. And so I was like, why won't he respond to my DMs, but he'll respond to my comments on the pictures? Then I started, instead of just saying, wow, this knife is beautiful, I started leaving comments of, wow, this knife is beautiful, I would like to commission one from you. And he would respond to those comments, but he would ignore the part where I said, I would like to commission a knife from you. It was the weirdest thing in the world. And then finally, I just got super desperate. And on my final comment that I left on one of his pictures, I said, wow, this is beautiful, you know, something along those lines. And I said, I would like to commission a knife from you. I want a 7.5 angel finger, 3-way deployment, Damasteel blade with the Timascus inlays. And for some reason, he responded to that one. And he said, oh, I have one of those. I'll sell it to you. And then he started DMing me, acting like my messages weren't sitting in his inbox for 3 months. I'm sorry. It was odd. I don't know if somehow he didn't see the DMs, but he saw the comments. I don't know if it was a perfect storm where every time he saw my comment where I said, I want to buy a knife from you, he just missed the part where I said, I want to buy a knife from you. But I think I'm bringing this up because I think one of the things that people who buy custom knives like this, one of the parts of the experience that they really enjoy is interacting with the maker, talking to the maker, having a back and forth, talking about this is what I want, this is what I'd like to see, these are the finishes I like, da, 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 da. And for this one, it really felt like if I truly was to ask him to make a 100% bespoke piece, it felt like it would have been a nightmare. It felt like I would have never actually been able to get a hold of him because I couldn't get a hold of him. And the only reason I have this one is because he happened to somehow have this one laying around ready to be sold. I don't even know what that means. He mentioned it was in his personal showcase. I don't know what that means. I didn't want to pursue that conversation too far because talking wasn't going super well. The communication wasn't super strong there. And so I'll just say that if you're the kind of person who, when you're pursuing customs, you're really looking to build a relationship with the maker, it might be difficult in this particular case with this particular maker to kind of get that ball rolling. I don't know what that is. Maybe I just had bad luck. I have no idea. But guys, that's all I'll say about this. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope I helped you kind of maybe make a buying decision. And remember, customs are variable. There is a chance that just because my action is the way that it is on this one, that doesn't mean that the action on the one that you get is going to be that way. Maybe you'll be able to crank the pivot and it'll still swing shut like a guillotine, right? But that's just not what mine does. Don't get me wrong. Super glassy, super smooth. It's super nice. It just doesn't do exactly what I want it to do. And at this price point, you know, I'm experiencing new things. I'm moving things around, and that's what I'm chasing right now. So again, I hope you all enjoyed this, and I will see you all next time.